Hello, welcome everybody. These are the Wednesday webinars. These are arranged by Pune River Revival. We are a group of many organizations and individuals who have come together to mainly protect rivers, trees, and anything related to environment. So before we start today's webinar, I just want to let you know that there is a notice in the local paper and there is a docket uploaded on the PMC website about tree felling. So these 689 trees are going to be axed. Some of them will be, as they say, transplanted, but we know the record of transplantation is very poor. Not even 40% of transplanted trees survive in our state or in our country. So if you look at this and if you can follow Marathi, 689 वृक्ष हे विकास करण्यासाठी आणि विकासाला नदीचं पुनरुज्जीवन म्हणलंय तर मुळा नदीचा विकास करण्यासाठी अडथळा ठरत आहेत. तर म्हणजे जवळजवळ 700 वृक्ष हे अडथळा ठरत आहेत असं त्यांचं म्हणणं आहे. आणि आय जस्ट वॉन्ट टू लेट यू नो दॅट दीज आर नॉट जस्ट ट्रीज, इट्स अ फॉरेस्ट, इट्स अ डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट. देर आर मोर दॅन 100 types of bird species, including peacock and painted storks and many more. There are turtles, there are mongoose, and many species are found there. So this is actually a forest. These are not just trees that you can transplant from one place to another. So the last date to send your objections in email is 13th March, and then there will be public hearing. So in the chat of this webinar window, in the Zoom window, I'm going to put all the emails where you can send your objections, and I'm also going to put some sample drafts. Please free to make changes and write your own name and send it out. So now we'll get back to the webinar. So today we have a very interesting topic. We have Ajay Phatak with us. Ajay is a trustee and faculty with Ecological Society. Before that, he was in the field of technology. He had his own software company and he's an IITian. And we all know Ajay because of his famous TED talk on energy and related things. So over to you, Ajay. I think I'll stop sharing my screen and you can share it.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So today we'll spend half an hour maybe or a little bit more on trying to understand this particular statement, how to be carless. The idea is that, the whole idea was that I have been using a bicycle for a very long time. I use car, if at all, approximately 1% of my need for commute. And then I thought that, why don't I run a thought experiment? What will happen if, all the cars in the world vanish? And if we have to make them vanish, what we may have to do, and what happens when they vanish? So before we come to this idea that what will happen if they vanish, let's take a quick stock of what does it mean by having so many cars in the world. Okay. Many of us like numbers, some of us don't, but you will still see the impact of some of these numbers when we share these. So let me go to the next one. Can you see this screen?
No, not yet.
No?
No.
Okay. There's always this challenge, but nonetheless, let me share this. It's not full screen, but can you see this now?
Yes.
Yes.
So I can. All right. So let's live with it for now. Limitations of technology. So let's look at this screen, right? The second screen that you see. So this is the scale at which we are talking about. When we talk about a car, what are we really talking about, right? So we are talking about 1.47 billion passenger cars on the planet. Now this number has increased initially steadily and eventually, so for example, around 50 years ago, this number was in millions. And now we're talking about 1.47 billion cars on the planet. 73 million cars are now produced every year. Imagine the number, right? 73 million cars produced every year. And what is the typical weight of the car? I mean, even if you assume that people are not buying SUVs, they're still buying 1500 kg of stuff when they buy a car. 1.5 tons. Multiply by 73 million, and you get a sense of what is the amount of material that we are kind of putting out on the streets every year. What does it mean in terms of value? Is this a value or is this a cost? Is something that we need to start asking ourselves. But we're talking about $3 trillion in terms of global automotive industry value. That means 3 trillion is not valuation of these companies, but 3 trillion is typically value of the cars sold every year on the market, right? Then we talk about how many jobs are there. Now, this is a point of concern. I'm sure all of us will say that, to save 10.1 million jobs, we need to do something. But the point is that, yes, there is a whole lot of jobs around the globe, and this is only jobs in the US. And that's why you will see that one of the most important thing that the US always does is find how to protect the car industry. Primarily because, and at least that's what they claim, is they want to protect jobs, right? Now, if you look at the number, therefore, every day we are talking about close to 200,000 cars. 200,000 cars every day roll out of their factories on the assembly lines. And essentially, what does it mean? It converts iron ore into, ironically, what we say is converts iron ore into traffic jams. And it at a scale which is like unfathomable. This is the kind of scale that we are talking about. If you look at the money spent in manufacturing a car and what is the economic activity that is therefore generate. So, when you talk about economic activity, it essentially says that that is the expanse of that dollar spent. So when you spend a dollar on manufacturing a car, all the related industries, may that be, construction of roads, parking lots, or, mechanics, rubber, tires, glass, all that put together, you're generating something like 4.23 times the amount of money that you spend in manufacturing a car. And what does that mean? That, as many of us already know, but just to re-emphasize, we are talking about creating these kind of consequences. What does that mean? It means that we essentially talk about consequences that we don't really want expanding further. And when we say what we do not want, I mean, all of us like to go visit a forest, but many of us don't even know that when we buy the next car, you're actually destroying a little bit of forest somewhere else. And that opaqueness of the technology is also a significant problem that we need to deal with when we talk about understanding the status here. The next one. So let's look at the hidden costs, right? Hidden costs are costs which are not put forth. We don't know what these costs are. So look at this. You're talking about, when we talk about car or automobile as an industry, and the fact that they're operating these many 1.47 billion cars operating on roads every day, we talk about so many deaths because of car accidents. 1.19 million people die because of accidents on the road. And interestingly, we always talk about the South Asian and Southeast Asian countries worried about malaria, but this number is even greater than number of people who die of malaria in Asia and Africa. What is the quantity of oil that we are talking about? We are talking about 24.3 million barrels of oil, and roughly today 100 million barrels of oil moves every day across these channels and ships, and 20% of that through the Hormuz channel, and so on and so forth. So we are talking about 1/4 of this oil is just eaten away by passenger cars. Just look at the quantity. The third interesting part is you're talking about what are the costs associated with these accidents and crashes because of either totaled cars or because of people dying or people needing hospital related services, etc. You're talking about the cost actually exceeds the value of the car industry on a yearly basis. So 3 trillion is the value, 3.6 trillion is the cost, and this is a direct cost associated with crashes that we see every year. We are talking about 184,000, couple 200,000, if you just want to round it off, additional deaths every year, and that these deaths are because of what we call as accelerated deaths because of air pollution. Vehicular air pollution, if you apportion and say how many deaths because of that, not necessarily directly, but essentially acceleration in number of people dying, it's as high as 184,000. We talk about 3.8 gigatons of CO2. Now, we are talking about emitting, today we emit roughly 38 gigatons of CO2 a year as a global economy. Now, of 38 gigatons, 10% of CO2 emissions is because of passenger cars. So that's a very large number, as you can see. And of course, these wars are emitting, I don't know how many gigatons of CO2 in a few days. Another very interesting part that you will see that car is not really benign. Car actually leads to a whole lot of land use change. And the number 70% gives you some idea about the land use change in cities where many of the US cities, especially if you go, I don't know if some of you have had a chance to visit Houston, but Houston is a city which is almost pretty much malls, parking lots, and roads, nothing else, right? So that's the extent of land use change you will see in cities just because of passenger cars. Now, another funny part that we need to look at is, and this I have stated very clearly in also one of my podcasts, and one of my TED talks, and also in a little story that I've shared with some of you on the same subject, that we are talking about 95% of the energy that is consumed is only in moving a car. It's not actually not used for moving person. Typically you have one person, or on an average 1.5 persons use a car. So 5% of the energy is used for moving people, and 95% is used in moving just the car. And that's not really of our interest. Moving the car is not of our interest. We want to move ourselves safely, nicely, comfortably. And let's go further. We are talking about around 25% of efficiency of conversion of petrol into movement. So that is chemical energy to kinetic energy. We are talking about roughly 1% of the energy effectively used to move a person, which is really our objective. And add to that people wanting to use SUVs, which are roughly 1.5 times more weighty. They have close to 2.7 tons of weight when we talk about SUVs. So you will realize that we are actually wasting almost all of our energy on doing something that we really do not want, and that is a very strange thing. Add to that the space that we consume. Now, how much space do we need for a car? One might say, whatever, 4 feet by 10 feet or 5 feet by 10 feet. But that's only a basic footprint of a car, right? We need then space on the road. We need space parking at the house. We need space parking at our office. We need space parking at a gym and whatnot. So you're actually multiplying the amount of space that is required by just one car. And unfortunately, 96% of the time, this car, which is supposed to move you, is not even moving. It is stationary, right? And that is very queer. I mean, if you look at this kind of a machine and you talk to engineers working on efficiency, I think this is absolutely laughable. You're talking about a machine which uses only 1% of the energy for the task it is supposed to produce, and it needs 5 times the more space than the space that is required by the machine itself. And the machine itself requires, 20 times more space than the person sitting in the car. You will realize, how inefficient this particular whole system is. Now we come to our situation, India situation, and why I feel, based on my thought experiment, that we still have a little bit of chance, right? Many of the countries are talking about car ownership, which exceeds 50%, 60%, 70%, and in the US, I don't know, it might even be more than 90%. But in India, we still have an opportunity, I feel. We are talking about just about 7.5% of Indians owning a car, and rest of us actually do a good job. We move into through buses, we take trains, we cycle, we walk. So all good things that are needed. A lot of us in India actually are already doing it. So our aspirations, if we say that this 92% of the people who are doing all good stuff, we want to move them to this 7.5% bucket, then that is going to be silly, right? Because you saw the extent of inefficiency that is built into this whole system. So we have this opportunity that if only 7.5% people are owning the car, is it possible that we can transition that these 7.5% into a bucket on the right hand side, so that we actually feel better? And there are so many positives, and we'll see how this transition is going to look fabulous. Now most countries actually, so if we say that why do we have a leapfrog opportunity? Of course, I mean the whole thing has to be done world over, but let's think a little bit about India first. Yeah, so most countries have to dismantle the whole system around cars. India, highways, suburbs, parking codes, etc., are still in the process of being built up. So we are not built up so much that it will be much harder for us to disassemble. Yet, so we can easily demonstrate that 1/6 of humanity can live without cars. Then it becomes a solid example of how people can live comfortably and happily without this mean machine. The fight for India's mobility future is actually going to define the way we are going to move forward in this century, is what I started thinking. So if we now paint this vision of world without cars, right, what are we going to phase out? We are not saying that everything goes away. We are saying all the private passenger cars go away, right? We don't need new highways because there are going to be no new passenger cars requiring a whole lot of roads. Parking requirements are going to be very minimum, only for incidentally, if you really look at the problems we face in cities already in India, is even if we say that we want 500 more buses, there is no place to park buses, even while we continue to buy a whole lot of cars and park these cars on the roads. So you will be able to make sure that you make way for parking of buses, especially buses or public vehicles, and or vehicles that are needed in emergencies. There is no need for fuel subsidies for private vehicles. Again, it's waste of money. So instead of that, you can use this money for something else. You do not need car-centric suburban development pattern. So this is something which can be very easily phased out. And then what will continue and what should grow is, we are talking about public transport. All these things can easily grow for two reasons. One is they will have reasonable space available for moving around. There will be enough space for parking buses and so on and so forth. Emergency vehicles, of course, should continue because there will still be people who will need emergency requirements. Cabs can continue, shared vehicles can continue. For example, ambulances will continue. You will have all the logistics and cargo movement, which can continue at least for the time being, till the time your freight logistics actually predominantly becomes based on trains. Fortunately, in India, our train system is fairly good, and it carries already a very large part of freight. So instead of roads being built for freight, we can basically try and see how we can extend our railway networks so that even the requirement of cargo moving on roads can be further reduced. Bicycles, e-bikes, e-scooters, micromobility, all of this, right? All of this will stay, and in fact, it will help many of us to be comfortable, move comfortably. Even those who cannot, physically use bicycles or walk, they can still use, electric bicycles, which are still comfortable. They are not as bad as bicycles, even while batteries will have some of the negative side effects. But if you compare with the scale at which these big things operate, that is negligible. Then we talk about shared autonomous vehicles. That is, if you're talking about this technology, whereby say you are going to have pods which will allow people to share these pods across cities, it still might continue. Of course, there is always the question whether you'll need them, and if you use everything else, you might even not need them, or you need them at a minimal level. And what really happens because of such a shift? Assuming that we stop doing what we don't want and we start doing what we really want, we suddenly see some very interesting green shoots. And what are these green shoots? We're talking about people suddenly stop dying. 1.19 million people stop dying because there are no road accidents. Or if there are road accidents, they are very minor because, cyclists colliding with each other doesn't happen. Nothing much happens, in that process typically. So people stop dying. Space appears out of nowhere. All the parking that, many times in many of the car dependent cities, parking is close to 50% of the space that is paved, which is, typically cemented. Now, if you don't need this space, this space can be given back. It can become parks. It can be given back to nature. It could become spaces which are public spaces. If you are not able to find space for housing, it can be used for housing. So there are so many things which are very important in the social milieu. Suddenly, this space becomes available, right? Air becomes breathable. Of course, today in the Indian context, there are many other apportionments which need to be considered, which includes a whole lot of dust. Part of that is because of the bad pavement, part of it because of tires producing microplastics, and they're plastics incidentally, they're not even micro rubber. Most of the tires are not really natural rubber anymore. So we're talking about that type of dust which can be eliminated, and of course direct emissions from the cars, especially the nitrogen oxides, which are far worse for our lungs than CO2, that gets eliminated. So air becomes breathable, and if we take some good actions on the dust for prevention, it can really become very breathable. The next part is good and bad. The spending can rise. People can move around. People can, when they can move around on the roads and they don't need to find parking, it is possible that they can visit shops and, buy things. Now, when you talk about this, this is not necessarily the best and ideal side effect. So we can always say that you have to look at changing this as well a little bit, as long as they start buying services which don't need too much of resources. Now, this is one real bracket which needs further study, further work to understand what can therefore be done there. Of course, I mean, this is not something which can happen overnight, but you can easily chalk out, if you really will, the 25-year plan. Now, 25-year plan, you have three phases. We are here in 2026. Let's go to 2050. So first phase is, make sure that you build these foundations. Now, what are these foundations? So essentially, you build far better alternatives. You will see that many people in Pune, after the metro was built, right? Metro was built, are preferring metro, and they don't want to drive from, Kothur to Viman Nagar every day, simply because that is far more comfortable. simply because that is far more enjoyable. They also are able to walk a little bit, so it's also healthy from that perspective. So building better alternatives is always an interesting step that must be taken. So we should actually support building and build up of public transport at a rapid pace. Not necessarily just metros, but it could be other options also, which are less expensive on the capital that you spend. You can also look at congestion pricing. So the core of the city, for example, if you have to take the car, you can say that it's going to cost you 1,000 rupees, or whatever that number is, which prevents people from wanting to take cars to core cities. That's also something that has been attempted in many of the European cities with great success, and I think it is something which can easily be done in places in India as well. Now, third point is always debatable, where we say remove minimum parking requirements. Now, people will revolt if they say that there is no parking. So it has to be mixed judiciously, how you can slowly but surely keep removing parking spaces rather than adding parking spaces. And expand zones which are car free. Therefore, there will be all the, for example, central places which have very little road space, they are congested, you can just make them car free. Of course, you'll have to build a little bit of infrastructure in between so that those who still carry cars will have no huge issues in doing this. Then you talk about the next phase, which means that I'm going to now restrict car sales. Now, many of the countries are saying that after 2035, we do not want to sell ICE cars, which is the internal combustion engine cars, which are based on gasoline or diesel. But actually, can you say that you'll not sell new cars after 2035? That's acceleration. That's acceleration of this whole idea. Ban all ICE and EV passenger cars to be new cars to be sold during this particular phase, right? And then you can build better rail systems, as I said, for both cargo and passenger traffic, etc. You can start reclaiming, really speaking, parking at this particular phase. And the third phase is, maybe all the cars which were still running are at the end of life, and they could be phased out. Now you have a lot of land suddenly becoming available, so your cities start becoming more livable, and correspondingly, you can even support these mobility as a service platforms rather than, so when you really need a vehicle which can accommodate 4 people, you still have them, but it is not something which you own that, right? So it's again a kind of public transport, not as efficient as a train or a bus, but it's still better, far better than a typical car. And then you, of course, support emergency, disability, etc. through these exemptions. So this plan, if you are able to execute, there is a potential that our thought experiment can actually happen, right? So that's something that I just wanted to talk a little bit about. So this gives you a bit more details. I'm not sure whether we need to go into these details, but I would just like to ensure that you look at this slide also, which gives you some more detail in terms of what do you mean by mass transit investment, what do you mean by congestion pricing or green corridor conversion, etc. So look at this. We are now talking about the policy actions, and because of these policy actions, you will see beginning of land reclamation, and that's most important for us. When we reclaim land, a lot can be done, right, for people and for nature. So one of the key things is ability to reclaim these lands through such policy actions, which is banning new car sales. Or existing fleet runs slowly and naturally it will run down over a period of time. Rail systems allow you to not need more and more highways. You can have on-demand shared transit as the last option if you really want to move in privacy. Maybe family wants to go from a place to another place, or there is an emergency, and so on and so forth. Suburban land, again, there will be a great opportunity even when you go further. Policy actions also allow you to do mixed land use, which means that the housing and businesses can be together, whereby there is no need for vehicles, and therefore we can restructure the so-called suburban systems that we have as such. This is the last phase again. It is re-emphasizing what then therefore is a new mobility system. So you're talking about mobility as a service. You're talking about very safe cycling and walking, good footpaths, good cycle paths, good bus rapid transit, and you make sure that emergencies, special requirements are always taken care of. So you're not saying that these people should just stay at home and do nothing, right? So once you have these set of enablers, you are establishing a new mobility ecosystem. Now, is it really fancy? I don't really believe so. For a reason is many of these things are happening in many of the European cities, right? Those who have had a chance to go to a city like Amsterdam or even a city like Cologne, you will see that there is hardly a need for people moving in cars, and therefore people don't do that. There is excellent public transport system. People are very comfortable cycling. There is good way of making sure that they are safe. So it is already done. Now, one of the issues again that is always flagged is, but our cities there are so many people in our cities, and I would say that is exactly the reason why cars don't make sense at all. Because if suddenly 50% of the people in India start owning the cars, you will in fact stop. The mobility will be zero. And that precisely is the point, right? So we actually need this whole public transport system, cycling, walking, far more than any of the advanced countries or rather Western countries where you still have issues related to, I mean, even if they have more cars, they still have space because there are not so many people. That's not with us. Therefore, it is even more important for us to look at this new mobility system. What is the energy dividend that we get and the carbon dividend that we get? We suddenly require 25 million barrels less every day, right? $25 million barrels of oil required reduces every day. So you don't need so many ships. You don't need so much of movement of material just because of that. Just look at the whole system by which the car needs to run. You're talking about need for oil, which means need for wells, need for oil extraction machinery, need for refining, need for ships, need for moving this oil from one place to another, all that, and at least 25% of that can just go away if we look at this scenario. And that is 10% of your 10% of your carbon emissions as well. Right? So look at this. And I think this itself is a reason why we should consider something like this very, very, very serious. Look at the materials which gets freed up. Right? We today need between 65 to 90 million tons of steel to make these whatever 73 million cars. Right? And this is close to 1/4 of the global production of steel. 1/4 of the global production of steel. Now, this steel can potentially be used somewhere else, or you probably don't even need it, which means we can descale the steel industry and do something else. Plastics, between 9 to 15 million tons per year of plastics are used by automotive industry. Now, one of the major concerns related to microplastics, again, you're talking about reducing that substantially, right? It can become substantially less in terms of microplastics pollution. Natural rubber. Now, typically, most of the tires are natural rubber plus some kind of a polymer. So 70% of the supply of natural rubber is used for tires. So as you probably know, that rubber plantations actually replace many of the forests, pristine rain, and these forests are in the rainforest areas. So basically close to the equator, and some of the most valuable forests that you're talking about, right? May that be in Southeast Asia, may that be in India, in Kerala, Kerala, or may that be in South America. So enormous amount of load, thereby you're moving your monoculture of rubber to something else. Amount of aluminium plus copper. Again, it can be refashioned, or just you don't need it, which means we are able to descale mining, which is also one of the huge issues when we talk about metals and oil. So where is the new value created in this process? So if we say that this whole transition is not just, it will be very interesting, because a whole lot of value is also created, for that matter, even in current economic system. I'm not even talking about changing the economic system here. We are just talking about still being in the current economic system. You are able to create new value in let's say manufacturing of public transport systems, whether they are buses, whether they are rail coaches, whether they are trams, or what have you. Real estate can do better. I'm not saying that all the space freed away by parking lots, for example, is given to real estate. But real estate can do better, for that matter, those who do not have housing, especially if you talk about India and the type of people who live in places which they shouldn't be living. I think they get opportunity to live in a better place. So that's possible. Your activity, economic activity can increase, and if you also add a few more constraints in terms of what people can buy, and provide levers such as taxes, less taxes or more taxes as to what you buy versus what you shouldn't, you might be able to convert this into an economic activity without the associated burden of a whole lot of resource usage. Then we talk about green infrastructure. We talked about that already, and a huge saving in public health costs. Now, if you talk about the United States, they talk about 16 to 17% of their GDP, which is huge, as you know, spent in healthcare costs. And of this, 80% is used in only 3 years of end of life, when people have zero quality of life. So you're talking about enormous saving in public health by making sure that your air pollution reduces, your accidents reduce, and so on and so forth. And what needs to change? There is the need for pivoting, right? You cannot just say tomorrow Tata Motors just closed down. And so that means auto manufacturers have to change the way they do their business. Oil industry has to figure out, what do they therefore do? What changes they need to do? They can move into either new energy business or something else, create a very different category of value. Banks will have to say that instead of car loans, they do something else, that they have to adjust. And banks have, as you know, have been adjusting all the time, depending upon the regulation, depending upon the demand, and so on and so forth. Insurers may have to change, they will have to pivot. And of course, same thing is with the workforce, which is working for the automotive industry. So that's it. This is the last slide. We call 1.19 million deaths realistic, but we say walking to the shop unrealistic. We talk about burning quarter of oil supply every year realistic, but we don't want to travel by bus or walk. We say that 96% of the space and 4% of utilization of this kind of a machine realistic, but we are not willing to spend more effort towards supporting public transport. So that's the scene today, right? So you'll have to see things differently, and if you start doing so, I'm pretty sure that even these signals can be given by all of us. It is not that these signals have to be necessarily and always done directly by policymakers. If more and more people not buy cars or limit buying cars, automatically the signals go, even in the current situation, back to the policymakers, and they will shift. For example, this whole reason of people building metros, apart from the fact that the project costs are higher, and that's what politicians and other members want, is also a signal that there is a realization that there is a need to shift, right? So with this, I'll close. If there are a few questions, I'll be happy to take.
Some of the comments are also in the chat box.
Yeah.
And
Let me-
I see a couple of hands raised. So do you want to directly take it?
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy.
So Gangotri, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having some cough since yesterday.
No
So,
worry.
yeah. Yeah. So, my question is when I first saw the poster, the heading was Freedom from Cars, Not from Comfort. But
Correct.
so far, I could understand observing various people around me on the road, or what you told as per the comfort terminology here in the presentation. तो
Mhm.
कंफर्ट मीन्स अगर कोई एक कार में बैठे हैं कि वो अपने डेस्टिनेशन में पहुंचेंगे, लेकिन
Mhm.
ये कार के वजह से जो ट्रैफिक हो रहा है, जो कंजेशन हो रहा है, उसमें उसका तकलीफ ज़्यादा बढ़ रहा है, उसको कंफर्ट नहीं मिल रहा है। लेकिन वो अगर ज़्यादा फास्ट मूविंग पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट में जाए तो और भी कंफर्ट, मतलब इतना वेट करने से बगैर, कुछ मिस करने से बगैर वो अपने डेस्टिनेशन में पहुंचेंगे। ये
Bravo.
कंफर्ट या सॉरी
That is correct.
या ये कंफर्ट यहाँ पे प्रेजेंट हुआ है। और मेरा जो एक्सपेक्टेशन था वो हेडिंग देख के कि लोग क्यों प्राइवेट कार, फोर व्हीलर क्यों चूज करते हैं, क्योंकि पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट उतना एसी वाला नहीं मिलते हैं, वहाँ पे चार्जिंग सिस्टम नहीं मिलते हैं, रास्ते में अगर देर हो भी जाए तो भी वो ऑनलाइन कॉल ले सकते हैं। अभी तो वर्क फ्रॉम होम के प्रैक्टिस में गाड़ी में बैठे बैठे ऑफिस का आधा काम हो ही जाता है। तो यहाँ पे ये वाला कंफर्ट को एड्रेस करने का वो देखने का, सीखने का मिलेगा, मुझे ये एक्सपेक्टेशन था। तो
Uh-huh.
यहाँ पे वही मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि ये वाले कंफर्ट के वजह से जो लोग पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट को अवॉइड करेंगे, प्राइवेट कार में ही जितना हो सके प्राइवेट कार में ही यूज करके अपना काम निकालेंगे,
Mhm.
इसको, इस मेंटेलिटी को कैसे एड्रेस करके कैसे चेंज कर सकते हैं?
So, very good question. And actually, half the time you are actually saying exactly what I am saying. That means that if you have a public transport system as good or better than how you are moving in a car, then people will use public transport, right? And that you are saying that that's what will happen. The point is that when we talk about a systemic change, there are many different things that need to be done. Like, for example, building excellent public transport systems. That is part of the plan. And if you really see phase one, phase two, phase three of what is being proposed, it's exactly that's a part of the plan. That's part one. The second part is the system of work that we have. And as part of this transition, which is not addressed here, but part of this transition, even the system of work will change, right? As you saying that, something breaks down, people are stuck in traffic, therefore they can work from the car. The point I'm trying to say is why should people get stuck in traffic in the first place? That's part one. Secondly, even the work systems will change if you have this mechanism, and these are working systems across many countries in the world. So this is not something which is, as I said, this is not fantasy. 50% of stuff of this kind is already happening in countries around the world. So we need to understand, what are the challenges and what are the things that we can really do to make such a shift. Okay, so I hope I've answered
Gangotri,
part of your question.
Gangotri, I just would like to add a bit. I think you wanted to say that there is a comfort in the car, like it is AC
Yes,
and
yes, yes, yes,
spacious and all that, and what happens to that. So I think
yes.
because I read Ajay's paper, I'm just sorry, I'm just adding to what he has already explained. He is saying that the public transport should be as comfortable. That means with ACs, enough space where you can carry your cycles also on the
Hmm.
public transport. So he is saying that you do not want to lose the comforts and luxuries, but instead of having that luxury in every car, it would be available in the form of facilities on public transport.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
in fact, there is a saying, there is a very interesting environmental thinker in UK who says that our policy should be guided by a principle called public luxury and private sufficiency. And I think that will help
Yes,
you understand what I'm saying.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have one more question. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, it depends on how many questions are there.
Please. Only Jaideep is another hand I see here.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is मतलब बस पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट के हिसाब से बस अगर जितना मैंने ऑब्जर्व किया बाकी व्हीकल के साथ एक ही रोड पे मतलब एक लाइन पे बस लेन जैसा वैसा तो नहीं चलते हैं, बीआरटी भी वैसा जब था वैसा भी नहीं था, वो इधर उधर करके दूसरे व्हीकल के सामने आ जाते हैं, लेकिन ये प्रॉब्लम ट्राम लाइन में नहीं होता। तो पुणे में, हाँ पुणे में ये क्यों है कि इंडिया में तो बंद ही हो रहा है, कलकत्ता में एक ही सिटी में है, बाकी के सिटीज में ट्राम है और ट्राम में मेट्रो के जैसे ही फैसिलिटीज मतलब सीटिंग अरेंजमेंट वैसा मिल सकते हैं, लेकिन सॉरी सॉरी
Gangotri, you go ahead.
ओके ओके, हाँ
Yeah.
हाँ, तो मेट्रो के जैसे ही मिल सकते हैं और ऊपर से मेट्रो के लिए अंडरग्राउंड खुदाई भी नहीं करना पड़ेगा, ऊपर का एलिवेशन वो कंस्ट्रक्शन भी नहीं करना पड़ेगा, बस नॉर्मल रोड पे ही लाइन डालना पड़ेगा। तो किस वजह से ट्राम नहीं आ रहे हैं इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में?
See, actually, many times it is also because of the road space. And so exactly the reason why some areas BRT is successful and some areas or some cities BRT is not successful, right? It's also the implementation when we talk about either trams or BRT type of situation. There is a need for clear understanding of the access, safe access to this public transport, right? So those are the issues which have become a challenge. I will not, I will put both these categories, BRT or trams, in the same bucket. Additionally, for trams, you also need to, put up now the electric infrastructure, because trams have to run. They typically are. It's a good thing that they're electrified, but the problem is that that infrastructure also is required, which is an additional infrastructure in all roads. So I think there is you'll have to balance the requirement of infrastructure versus what are you achieving there for, right? So I'm not saying that trams are bad or BRT is bad, but there are certain places where they will be successful. There will be certain places where there might be a problem.
Jaideep.
I'm done.
Jaideep, please.
Yeah,
एक फक्त मी सांगते की प्रश्न तुम्ही मराठी, हिंदी, इंग्लिश या तीनपैकी कुठल्याही भाषेत विचारू शकता. Jaideep, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I came from a very heavy car usage habit, and then I just want to exhort Ajay has this 1, 2, 3 rule. So if he can reiterate for others to benefit, I hugely benefited. But before that, I'll also add another perspective. You've mentioned the auto industry, and I just want to add, I come from the auto component industry, which is a multi-tiered. It goes sometimes 6, 7 layers. There's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, and I particularly supplied to Ford, GM, Tata, TVS, all of the works, about 1 million parts per day. And even just a drop of 5% in the volume, like they give a monthly volume to make, the entire industry gets on a group and says, oh, dhanda bahut kharab ho gaya, dhanda. So it's my point is, this kind of education not only of course has to happen primarily from the consumers changing their tastes and behaviors, but also needs to go down the supply chain in terms of that we need to retool and repurpose our facilities, our machinery, and all of that.
That is correct. Absolutely. Because ultimately, it's not just about these businesses, but also about people working in these businesses, right? So you cannot suddenly say that 10 million people do not have anything to do. So you're absolutely right. It has to be percolated to, all these. And again, this is not a transition which happens in a year. We are talking about a long 20, 25-year time span. But if we are able to plan, if we are able to say that this is how the industries will change, they can say that here is where we want to go from where we are. I think there is definite possibility that we can find pathways. I mean, the whole of the management consulting world is built upon this whole idea of, from where we are to where we want to be, right? If we decide where we want to be properly, I think there is a way we can, move from here to there.
And if you can, highlight your 1, 2, 3, 4 rule.
Sure. So, it's a very simple rule which I definitely follow. So whenever you want to go alone, I would rather walk or use a bicycle. Now, of course, if you have to go very far, you might decide to use a scooter, etc. But typically, when going as a single person in a city like Pune, I've never felt a need of anything but a bicycle or maybe just a couple of my own feet. Two is when two of you are going, right? If you two of you are going, use a scooter. Scooter is much less heavy than a car. As you know, scooter is probably 100 kg, 120 kg versus a car which is 1800 kg. So you know that if you're two of you and again you are doubling it up, you're still far better off than a car, right? In terms of effective use of the metal and effective use of the fuel. Then if you're three, you can use, auto rickshaw. Three people can comfortably sit in an auto rickshaw, go from one place to another. Again, auto rickshaw is not far more weighty compared to the weight of the auto rickshaw is probably double or, around 500 kg compared to an 1800 kg car. So you're still better off. And then your three people are sitting there. And only if you are moving at 3+ people typically or three or more, and you need to go a long distance, you can probably choose a car. Just doing this itself, I'm telling you, can save you around 90% of the money at least, and you will be 90% better off in terms of your emissions, in terms of your impact on environment, as far as your mobility component is concerned, and which is one of the very big components of the impact that we make, of course, apart from buying things which we don't really need.
So Ajay, this was a really inspiring session because generally what happens that people always spell out the problems, and when we look at all these numbers and the numbers of pollution and the problems are so huge that sometimes it just makes us numb. But you have given not only the solution but the phases, the timeline, and it looks kind of optimistic picture, and that's why I'm saying that it's quite inspiring. I'm not going to thank Ajay because he's part of our PRR family. He's a family member. So, but this was really helpful and very good picture, I would say, in terms of solutions and in terms of where we can go. Those who are in your network, like your friends and family, could not attend today's session. This is going to be uploaded on our YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search Pune River Revival, and this will be uploaded in next 1 week or so. So please share that with them. We need to reach out to as many people as we can. On the same channel, you can see all of our previous webinars, and they all are very interesting and useful. If you still haven't done that, please follow us on our Twitter account. Search for Pune River Revival on Instagram and on YouTube, Facebook, and you will get to know about all our activities and all such kind of very interesting sessions. So before we stop for today, please do not forget, I have put that in the chat, please do not forget to send emails to PMC Garden Department and Tree Authority, basically AUND and Tree Authority. The email IDs are there. So please write to them because these 689 trees are getting impacted, and these are not the only ones. The total number, official number, is 22,000 trees. The reality is far worse than that. So this is, now they have become so smart that they are not going to cut down thousands of trees at a time. This particular docket will be only for 618 and whatever 700 trees. There in another 2 months there will be another docket of 700-800 trees. So that is how they are doing. And as I said before, these are not trees, these are actually forests, and we have to save it. So this is just by Friday we have to send out email. After that there will be public hearing. I want I want to request all of you to attend that hearing also. We want to be there in like hundreds and thousands of people we want for public hearing, and that is the only way we can stop this and save this. Thank you, everybody. If we don't have any other questions, I think we can stop for today.
So Prajakta, what I would suggest is if you can share the story with all of them. Now, this is a little bit, this session was a bit serious, but people, would like to read the story, which is not as serious, but gives the same.
PDF, na?
PDF, yes.
Oh.
So you can share it with, any number of.
I will send out on all the groups, all the WhatsApp groups, PRR. I'll send out the PDF because yeah, that PDF where how to be careless. Many people first read careless, and they think, oh, should I be careless? And then you understand that the title is actually how to be careless. आणि ते खूपच अगदी पुलं स्टाईल मध्ये लिहिलेलं आहे. इट्स व्हेरी ह्युमरस अँड इट्स व्हेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, like engrossing. So definitely I will send out on all the groups, and also when we upload the video, the webinar, I can put that in the comment. I don't know if YouTube allows that, but I think if it does, I will try to put it there also.
All right.
Okay.
So thank you guys. Thank you for attending.
Thank you for attending.
You had some fun.
And good night. And please send your emails by 13th.